I am starting this introspective review of the Sasquatch puzzle with the physical. I admit I was surprised to find Sasquatch had got psychic while I wasn't looking. To be honest, I went through most of the stages of grief and mourning over how my monster in the woods had been killed and replaced with all manner of strange things that just didn't seem necessary to me. I tried to avoid the issue at first, but I found more and more people who seemed to me to be rational and serious observers who were trying to make sense of strange things around Sasquatch. Mind you, I'm not at all squeamish about the metaphysical and the spiritual. While I have been unable to spend days or weeks in the deep woods over the last few years, I have explored the strange in the city. I am an engineer and I work on advanced technology, but I have experienced paranormal influences enough to recognize they cannot be dismissed. I have experienced haunting phenomena. I have seen telepathic influence on technological devices. I have looked into psychics and mediums, spirit guides and ghosts, and I do not dismiss it all. To be sure, there is trickery and fraud out there, but there are also the occasional gifted individuals who seem to have an uncanny way of producing profound insights. With my current outline of content, I will start addressing the metaphysical in maybe the 4th or 5th edition of content to this channel. However, if you are interested in knowing how an engineer who is an honest skeptic and dedicated to rationalism and critical thinking looks at the metaphysical and spiritual side of the paranormal, you will get to hear about it. You'll just have to wait a while. Here, I have several examples of how the brain does silly and potentially dangerous things, uses chemicals and other tactics to control our behavior without our consent. Now, if someone tells you a story and you know that story cannot possibly be rooted in any form of fact, you may consider them to be an idiot. If you tell someone a story which is absolutely true and the one you relate the story to cannot accept it, you may consider them to be an idiot. We exercise judgment all the time. I would even suggest that judgment is the favorite hobby of Homo sapiens. We exercise judgment before everything, even sex. Think about it. It keeps our brains feeling good about ourselves, but only by placing ourselves as better than others. We judge, and we struggle to deal with why and how, when we should just stick to what. Why and how are judgments. Just try to understand the experience and the observations. For those of us who have experienced Sasquatch, we know these judgments can be harmful. They can damage lifetime friendships. But what do humans do when confronted with a new idea that might force them to rethink how the world works? One which may force them to accept ideas they have considered impossible. You may be the owner-operator of your body, but the brain is in charge. Without your consent, it will use chemicals to alter your state of mind. It will distract you with trivial ideas. In extreme cases, it may rob you of consciousness. Fainting is an option. Given an appropriate cocktail of mind-altering drugs, all available to the brain at a moment's notice, the commitment of experiences to long-term memory and even short-term memory can be sabotaged, all to save you from realizing that what you thought might make you look like an idiot. Suggested background material. To understand the basic elements of what the brain will do to keep you feeling good about yourself. As background, I suggest you watch the first video I have linked to in the notes below. The one titled, "Why Do Stupid People Think They're Intelligent?" It might be valuable for you to watch that one right now, and then come back to watch the rest of this. So I'll give you a few moments to make up your mind and click over to that. By the way, this got a lot longer than I expected, so I broke some of what I wanted to present here into future content. If you have seen that video, then you have some idea of the brain's capacity to defend its owner-operator from experiences that might alter their understanding of how the universe works. But I want to give you an example of just how irrational a brain can get while defending its owner-operator from things too strange to accept. In this case, the observation of a building reputed to be haunted. A friend of mine related this to me a while back. Try to put yourself in the place of that friend of mine. Think carefully about what happens. A friend of yours does the paranormal investigation sort of thing, ghost hunting, if you will. Their team is missing a couple of people for a big project, and you are invited to participate. You also know someone who would be willing to participate, and the reason another person is necessary is that this group wants to avoid individual stories. So wherever possible, no one is anywhere alone during an investigation. Your guest agrees, but has never experienced this sort of phenomenon before. They say they're interested, but they're not sure any of this is real. By the way, if you are ever actually in a situation like this, ask for clarification. English is an imprecise language in normal use, and what this person should have said, to be intellectually honest, was, they are absolutely certain nothing can happen because all this is just stories to scare kids. Now, maybe they thought they were being polite or politic, or they just weren't willing to admit their abject disbelief for some reason. It is Saturday evening in 2016. It's around 11:35 p.m. You enter a room with your friend. You are both being quiet in order to capture any sounds that may happen, mundane or otherwise. The room is empty of furniture. There is a closet. It is open and also empty. You voice an observation to your friend. Perhaps in response to your observation, there is a clear and distinct disembodied voice in the room. The voice is clearly different from anyone you know to be in the building at the time. Your friend suddenly realizes they need to check their incoming faxes at their office at home. There's a very important note they've been waiting for, and they really need to check it right now. In fact, this is the most important thing in this person's life right now. Let's think about this a second. It's 2016. Only banks, lawyers, and doctors use faxes, and most doctors and lawyers have moved ahead to email and scanners by now. It's almost midnight on a Saturday. It will be at least 30 hours before anything you can possibly do in response to a fax will be relevant. Your friend leaves, and it is months before you run into them again. They have no memory of the entire experience. Their brain has successfully avoided having a paranormal experience stuck in long-term memory. It has been washed, pressed, and starched. It is stunning how the brain can just take over and go to amazing lengths to avoid life-altering events, even after it's already happened. If the situation warrants, the brain may even rob the owner-operator of consciousness to avoid an experience happening right now. Fainting is an option. The brain can also alter your perceptions. It can fill in details that are more comforting than what may be observed right at the moment. It may block things from your view or let you see things that you expect. Consider a pilot learning to fly a new aircraft, let's say one with retractable nose gear. During flight, the nose gear is stored to reduce drag and save fuel. During landing, it is extended and locked to support the weight of the aircraft and its contents securely. In a small plane, the way you check that the gear is down and locked is to look through the window to the side. You look through a small marker in the glass, and there's a mirror on the wing strut. You put the mirror in the marker, and if the gear is down and locked, you will see the hub of the wheel in the mirror. At the moment the gear is lowered, something distracts the pilot, and they miss that step in the checklist. A few moments later, they look to the window to see the gear is down and locked, and it's just as they expect it. The only problem is, it's not actually so. Now, when this happens, it's often a smaller airport. The tower knows the aircraft has a pilot in training from the flight plan. Usually, the tower will actually look out the window from time to time, and sometimes they'll remind the pilot to check their nose gear. I have actually seen this happen. The pilot did actually see the gear down, even though it was not. They see it because they expect to, and because if it was not so, then they would be at fault. Their brain makes them look good. Now, typically there are multiple checks on certain points, like nose gear down. So it's very likely the pilot would notice it on a recheck. Or maybe the plane didn't feel right towards the end of the approach. They might catch it on their own. But sometimes a plane actually lands like that. Usually the pilot reports they saw the gear down and locked on approach. The brain can make you see or not see whatever is important enough at the moment to make it look good. Knowing this, I know there are times people see something, but what they remember may not be quite exactly what was there. If the brain made it up, it will get defensive when questioned because the questions are likely to revive the actual memory of the event. I know because I've observed my own brain doing this. So I will ask probing questions at times designed to help you determine if your brain has done something to alter your memory. I'll bet that often people get a glimpse of a tree peeker and maybe their brain just doesn't let them really see what was actually there, but suddenly they get a sense of, it's time to be somewhere else right now. How do we treat something which is safely distant, but the idea of which terrifies us? Think of the Nazi or the Japanese military actions in World War II. We made fun of them in cartoons and stories to make them less real and less present. Now, if someone won't put the subject down, there are those who will get violent to make them shut up. If someone in the neighborhood is of German or Japanese descent, they may be looked upon as possible agents of the enemy. And if you defend your neighbors, you might find yourself thought of as a sympathizer to the enemy. It's the brain that does this. It's a kind of chemical warfare in a way, and honestly, it's hard to even blame the person for what they're doing. Their brain is drugging them into an angry and irrational behavior. When you encounter a Sasquatch, whether you sought out the places they go or were just enjoying the outdoors, you usually don't have the ability to just wipe the experience from your mind. When the encounter is startling, by the time you can reach a safe place, the experience is already rooted in long-term memory, and the option for unexperiencing it is gone. The intervening time is filled with your fear and apprehension about the event, and those feelings will dominate the memories you have. Another option your brain may create for you is missing time. With proper desperation in some cases, the brain may be able to block most everything that might lead to remembering that event. Whether you found the experience traumatic or not, you may find yourself ridiculed for believing such a thing could even happen, and are once again traumatized to some degree by the judgment of others. Consider that many people may have a fairly delicate sense of reality upon which their lives depend. They have decades of being programmed to believe they are the shiniest things in the universe. Nothing is cooler than they are. Consider that your experience challenges their sense of reality. It challenges their sense of reality in the same sort of way that your experience challenged yours, except they do not have the actual direct encounter to prevent denial. They have an escape from their potential trauma. In a way, you can't even really blame them. It isn't them, it's their brain. It's defending its sense of reality so its owner-operator can enjoy a beer and watch sports on television. You have the right to tell your story, maybe even the need to tell a story for your own mental health. But others will judge your story from their own experience, and their world may not have room for something like the Sasquatch. If someone is starting to mock or ridicule your experience, your story is triggering a defensive response in them. They are not emotionally or intellectually ready to deal with your story, and they are not spiritually mature enough to be polite about it. They are not ready, and perhaps you should not force them to go someplace they are afraid of. This isn't limited to Sasquatch. It encompasses belief too. If you believe strongly in someone, one of the most important things to realize is that others will not be persuaded by your passion or your trauma. The truth is irrelevant, and if what you have to say makes them uncomfortable, then don't fly that flag in their presence. You do have the right to what you know, and they have the right to maintain a blissful state of ignorance and denial. This phenomenon applies to psychic abilities, UFOs, and many others, even Sasquatch language. Their brain will defend its accepted sense of reality viciously and will take no prisoners in the process. And it isn't just a matter of not believing. It is most likely much deeper than that. Never be afraid or ashamed of the truth of your experiences. Simply be aware that other people are simply unable to listen respectfully, and they will defend their ignorance viciously. I work as a consultant and a contractor. My interest in this field would, for now, present potential complications in future work. I depend on clients willing to retain my services. Some of their brains just don't have room or time for this sort of stuff. I am not ready to retire, and I am not independently wealthy, so until one of those things happens, I will endeavor to find interesting backdrops for this content. Besides, I have a face made for radio and, well, a voice made for blogging. The brain is capable of remarkable feats to keep us in our comfortable reality. People may defend their ignorance with irrational viciousness, all to avoid knowledge which may change their world view, which may take them to places they're afraid of. It's truly a matter of public safety that people should actually know there are things out there we do not fully understand. Nonetheless, for most people, there may not be room in their brains for anything which is not broadly accepted as normal. So long as they stay in the city, they're probably safe, mostly. I am the curious cryptid, and we are not so far from the times of pitchforks and torches, and it is a delicate matter to frighten the villagers. Humans have a tendency to kill what they're afraid of,